Now we move into sell or process further decisions. Businesses often must decide whether to sell a product as is or process it further to sell at a higher price. The decision depends on incremental revenue versus incremental processing cost. If additional revenue exceeds additional processing cost, then processing further is profitable. If not, the product should be sold as is. Let's look at a single product example. PureProtect sells unpainted doors but is considering adding painted doors as an option. Painted doors sell for a higher price, but painting adds extra cost. We compare the incremental revenue from painting to the incremental painting cost. If the contribution margin increases, then painting should be offered. Notice the outcomes of the decision to either paint or not paint the doors. The incremental analysis shows that an increase in sales price of $50 exists when PureProtect paints the doors. The painting costs $35, so the incremental increase in contribution margin is $15 for the painted doors. Now complete Learning Activity 7-9. All-out aluminum is comparing traditional bats versus custom painted bats. Traditional bats have a sales price of $150 and contribution margin of $59. Custom bats have a sales price of $180 with additional painting costs of $25. Your job is to compute the contribution margin difference and decide if custom painting should be offered. Pause here and work through the activity. Once you've finished, check your answers with the solutions provided in the back of Chapter 7. Now we introduce joint product decisions. Joint products are produced from a single input and then split into multiple products at a split-off point. The key idea is that joint costs incurred before the split-off point are sunk and irrelevant to the sell or process further decision. We focus only on costs and revenues after the split-off. Let's look at an example, Mott's Creamery. Whole milk can be sold as is or processed further into skim milk and gelato. We compare the contribution margin from selling whole milk versus the contribution margin after processing further. If further processing produces higher contribution margins, then further processing is the better option. Let's look at the data. You can see that the sales price of a gallon of whole milk is $3.45, and the production cost is $2.80 for a contribution margin of 65 cents per gallon of milk. If Mott selects to process further, skim milk sells for $2.75, but gelato sells for $10 per gallon of milk. That results in an increase in sales price to $12.75. The joint production costs of producing the whole milk of $2.80 remain. However, there's additional processing costs of the gelato, and that's $8.30. Taken together, the new contribution margin would be $1.65 per gallon of milk if they produce both skim milk and gelato. That's an increase of $1 per gallon compared to selling gallons of whole milk. Now complete Learning Activity 7-10. Stanwyck Farms processes soybeans. They can sell soybeans as is or process further into soybean oil and soybean meal. Your job is to determine whether processing generates more profit. Compare the contribution margin of selling whole soybeans to the contribution margin of selling the processed products. Pause here and work through the activity. Once you've finished, check your answers with the solutions provided in the back of Chapter 7.